Hello, I'm Toycat, and welcome back to the A to Z of geography. Today we are on the letter E, and before going into this, I assumed there'd be two countries that could be the most populated E, and we obviously worked out that it was Estonia. With 1.3 million people, Estonia is, I'm just kidding. We're talking about Ethiopia today, one of the most successful countries on the African continent. Indeed, not only has it avoided many of the pitfalls that its neighbors have fallen into, but it also has a very successful federalized government, which means that it is very, very much on course to be a big regional power, and indeed, you could argue already is there. Has a very functional government, a very thriving capital city, and indeed, although there are some issues with its neighbors, it is one of the more successful countries, and if you want to, just because we're talking about Africa, we have to make at least a small reference to the fact that it was arguably one of the very few places in this continent that wasn't colonized. Some maps like this one from Vox will be like, well, the whole world was colonized by Europeans, you see, ignoring that, like, there's quite a few obvious issues of this. One is that Europe, I mean, do I have to say any more? Two is the fact that they make a clear reference to there being a European sphere of influence, but not putting Thailand in there for some reason, even though they clearly would fall into that if you know, I just think that's ridiculous. But the other one here is clearly the fact that, well, Ethiopia itself was never colonized. It's only colonized if you include the fact that it gave up some of its lands to Italy, and so ultimately I would make the argument that this is a ridiculous map to try and use current day borders and then not adjust them for how things have changed. Anyway, with that said, Ethiopia was never colonized and is very successful in every way except its issues with its neighbors, because it does border 7 separate African countries, and the interesting thing about those countries is that it has disputes more often than it doesn't, but let's go into that now. Ethiopia borders 6 different countries. This is what they say, this is what the UN says, but by the end of this video, I'll let you know if maybe I can convince you there are 7, because there is a very interesting case that is different to what you might expect. But the interesting thing about Ethiopia's borders is, honestly, I feel like the countries and the issues that it has in their borders are far fewer than the ones that it doesn't have. To put this simply, let's just say that out of the 6 UN recognized states that Ethiopia borders, ignoring this very blurry border it has with Somalia, it only it doesn't have full-on disputes of Djibouti, where they have very good bilateral trade, and South Sudan, where after it went independent from regular Sudan, they smoothed out the border and tried to make sure that everything was above board, and they got that done at a summit. And so with every single other country around them, they have some form of issue. In the case of Sudan, it can be fairly small. In the case of Kenya, it's about nomadic travelers. Indeed, one of the interesting things about Africa as a whole is these are the borders that represent the continent, but ultimately, those borders don't mean too much to many of the people living near them. It is very hard to actually enforce several of these borders, and Ethiopia's major example of that is Kenya, where it is very, very, very lightly populated on both sides, but the people are nomadic and tend to just cross the border a lot. So they had some issues of Kenya that are mostly being resolved by trying to work out how, in kind of like tribal lands between the US and Canada, how do you give these people the right to cross the border while still making sure there very much is a border that they're crossing? That would be the fair and even way they're trying to do things. However, when it comes to Eritrea, I feel like they have a valid reason to be mad at Ethiopia, because, yeah, so Eritrea was an Italian colony, but Ethiopia feels like it should have been theirs, because it was kind of stolen at the, under the threat of force otherwise, and so Eritrea is the Italian colony. The UN gave it, it was given to the UN as a mandate to go independent, and they said, well, before you go independent, join a federation with Ethiopia for 10 years, and so they did that, and then Ethiopia dissolved their parliament and said, nah, you're ours now. They had a big old war, and it's taken decades to get to a point where they're not crazy at each other's throats. Also, the northern region of Ethiopia, the Tigray region, is also one which has had a lot of conflicts. You've probably heard about the Tigray War, actually. Also, there is the fact that Somalia, lots of terror groups tend to cross their border into Ethiopia. Ethiopia tends to find that that's not okay. I don't like when people come into my house with bombs, and Ethiopia feels very much the same way, something they are big thumbs down towards. And yeah, long story short is every single one of these borders has some issue going on with Ethiopia, and the most interesting one in my opinion has to be this Kenya-Somalia tri-point, which is just because it follows a river right here. Kenya and Ethiopia have a very well-demarked border that follows the river mostly. It's one of those ones that's kind of gone out of sync with the actual border. However, the border between Kenya and Somalia is a straight line. They just drew a few straight lines with some points. It works for them, I guess, but the interesting thing about this is it means that on this side of the river right here, you can see that it's actually caused just a very slight issue where that line continues, and wow, there's this part of territory on the Ethiopian side that technically belongs to Somalia. This is the case where I'm talking about where, you know, these are the official borders, but ultimately it's not like there are Somalis setting up land on this side, mostly because Somalis can't really even police their own border, which leads to all sorts of fun issues. Anyway, the Ethiopian state is a very, very successful one, and the interesting thing about it is its capital city is somewhere you might actually fly through at some point. However, to talk about its capital, how about we talk about the regions of Ethiopia? Ethiopia is divided into 12 regions with 2 city-level regions, which are Addis Ababa and Dire Dawa. Funnily enough, Harare, despite being this size, smaller than either of the city-states, is a full-on region of its own behalf, but we'll ignore that for now, and instead focus on the fact that the way these are born looks very erratic to an outsider, like Oromia right here. It seems like it's an insanity. However, this is actually a very logically drawn map because they went by ethnic lines. There are a lot of ethnicities inside of Ethiopia, and rather than trying to do the thing that many other African countries land on, which is how about we use lots of force to make people feel like they're the same and draw very arbitrary borders, instead they did the probably more logical thing of having borders follow those actual ethnic lines. And although it leads to weird situations like, well, Oromia right here is not only a bizarre shape, but also their capital is its own separate, region. But if you look right here, you can, and the southwest right here, it's just southwest Ethiopia, or the southwest, or the southern national northern people's region. There's a lot of bizarre titles right here. There's even a Somali region where the people are more Somali. But the fact is that the fact that none of these places do tend to drift apart, besides Tigray. Whoopsie. The fact that this doesn't happen is at least a good sign, right? And so just to go show you them all individually, because I really like these flags. Flags of Addis Ababa. I quite like it. Here's the flag of Afar. Oh, it's got a couple of sharp things and a pentacross on there. Very, very cool. What we got? We got an Amhara region flag. Oh, I like that one a lot. They've got a big old lake going on there. Benishangul Gumaz. Ooh, it's got a little bit of an Arab vibe to it, but using the Pan-African colors. Big fan. We got the Central Ethiopian regional state. Again, this is what I mean when I say, like, well, some of these things tend to fall apart because they're gathering a lot of ethnicities into the same place. But Gambella, it's a nice flag, have to say. Ooh, hurrah! That's what I'm talking about. Hoorah indeed. I mean, I love what's going on here with the bird and the justice scales. It's not actually justice scales, but it's balancing something, and I'm a big believer in balance. That is this place right here. Very fascinating. We've got Omoria, which I hate to tell you, but this is the worst one. You're gonna have to see me after class. This is the very, very big region. This is Sidama, and this is their region. This is Bandeira de la Retio, Somali Ethiopia, and then we've got Southern Ethiopia regional state over here. I like the bird. It's not bad. It's I'm sure it's great if I saw it in full size. And then this is the Southwest Ethiopian People regional state, which I feel like for a first flag, good job. I don't hate that at all. Speaking of things I don't hate, the population situation in Ethiopia. In 1950, just 17 million people called Ethiopia home. That was smaller than many European nations at the time, whereas now with 126 million, it is larger than all but Russia, and Russia doesn't really count as European. And so, wow, this is an incredible transformation that is going to continue. Interestingly enough, despite having a similar population growth to the Dr. Congo, with about just under 20 million people being born in the last 5 years, there is a much more stable increase that this looks to be having because of the country's actual economic development. One of the important things in becoming a more powerful country is not just having a lot of people that exist and sending them somewhere and hoping they don't die, but instead actually having economic and regional development, something Ethiopia is doing very well. They are building large amounts of infrastructure, including a very successful airport in Addis Ababa, by the way. You're gonna, at some point, your cheapest flight option will be through there. They are taking advantage of their geographic position, very close to the center of the world, to become a big place for people to connect, which can then allow a lot of people to go into the country, and lots of cargo and etc. can make their way into the biggest city. Indeed, by the way, one of the fun things is this. When you look at the population density, you can see that despite being landlocked, Ethiopia has a large number of people and takes full advantage of that, something which is very good news. Looking at Ethiopia's future on the demographic level, it looks very, very solid, especially as you can see right here, all trends suggest that it will eventually flatten out, but not, again, one of the scariest facts is, well, you can either focus on economic development or having lots of people. Ethiopia is blurring the line in a way that seems as though it will become a very powerful country soon, and if you ever want to go, see it before it goes there, make sure you don't go to the Tigray region, to make sure you don't go to anywhere in the northwest, or the Somali border, or really the border with Djibouti either, or the border with Sudan, or South Sudan, or Kenya. Just, don't go near the borders in, really, honestly, but you can go to the capital city, and the area just around it if you want to, and you can go to the southwest as long as you stay away from the borders, and if you want some other travel advice, make sure, oh wow, it's very, very broken down. Make sure that you actually make sure you get travel insurance. It's always a good thing to hear from the government. And safety and security. There's a high threat of terror attacks. That's fine. It might be at an airport or a station or a restaurant or a place of worship. If you just ignore like all the places you might go when you visit the country, you'd probably be fine, honestly. And also, if you just as long as you feel like kidnapping is an adventure, then I think that's good. And also there's pickpocketing and scams, but you know, there's pickpocketing and scams in London, honestly. So it's all the same. Just make sure you know that the time works differently, and there's rarely life jackets. Or protective railings. You know, who wants life jackets or protective railings? And also illegal drugs and prison sentences. Just don't do illegal drugs or go to prison. And also do not, 1 to 15 years for same-sex activities. Also, don't take antiques out of the country or use a camera near a military site or drones or satellite phones. Oh, that's interesting, huh? Anyway, speaking of things that are interesting, oh yeah, don't drive after dark. Because there's no lights on vehicles. Anyway, yeah, fascinating country. Would love to go sometime, actually. I'm going to make sure, though, when I do go, that I will obviously have a vaccination, and also will not go to most of the country, apparently. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the A to Z of geography. I have been enjoying this immensely. I'm not looking forward to F. I pray that I'm wrong about what the biggest F country is, but I've got fears, internet. I've got some real big fears. I hope that in the next 23 hours or so, I'm praying that we can have a new state formed somewhere. You know, maybe we could have like oh wow, where would have to even break through it? That'd be a big country. Maybe India. Maybe we could have like the free states of, you know, like, I guess we'd have to have a few together. Or actually not, the Free State of Uttar Pradesh. If you're watching this and you're in the Uttar Pradesh Parliament right now, consider secession, and quickly, please, do it. I need you on this. I need you guys as assistance. Maybe Iran, you could become Iran. You know, think about it. All those sanctions against Iran right now, they'd all go away if you guys just change your name. So someone who's in a high position, somewhere in a very densely populated country, I need your help now more than ever. But as always, second channel, don't care about France.